Hello, everyone. My name is Clare Burovac, and I'm the General and Artistic Director of the New Orleans Opera and a member of the Steering Committee for Opera America's Women's Opera Network. I'm honored to be here today to host today's session, which is part 4 in Opera America's series, Taking Care, Mental Health for Opera Professionals. Today's topic is mental health care in professional settings. Living and working in the same space has been a new experience for many workers during the pandemic. There are pressures, real and perceived, about our time spent working, our focus, and our availability that greatly differ from working in a professional space. How do we balance setting boundaries between our personal and our professional lives when they occupy the same physical space? Many organizations are now returning to the offices and the rehearsal rooms. When we work together in person again, how can we become our own best advocates for mental health? Joining me today is Judy Brady, Doctor of Social Work and licensed clinical social worker. Judy has a private practice as a psychotherapist in Salt Lake City, Utah, and her clientele focus is primarily with adults and adolescents, as well as marriage and family therapy. Her clinical experience over the decades spans a wide range of mental health issues, including schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and traumatic brain injury, just to name a few. Judy was born and raised in Utah, receiving her bachelor's degree in sociology from Brigham Young University and her master's and doctorate degrees from University of Utah. She also has taught as an adjunct professor in the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City from 1973 through 2014. Judy and her husband Drew live on 7 acres near Kaysville, Utah, about 20 miles north of Salt Lake City, and they are actively involved with the Utah district of the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions. Judy, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful to have you here with us today.
Let me begin by thanking everyone for the honor of being able in a brief moment time, because COVID has changed our whole concept of time, by just starting out with an attitude and a gratitude for the opportunity that everyone is having to re-examine the reality that they're living with COVID. What has happened that has been unanticipated, frankly not predictable, is that our world as we've known it is now profoundly been altered by both what we can do and what we can't do. And adults, even children, are empowered by feeling like they have autonomy, they have the opportunity to be independent, to take initiative, to be active. COVID redefined who we could be active with, where we could be active, and how much we could be interactive. One of the really challenging things about COVID and being isolated at home, that being one of them, and isolated from the settings that we love, our workplace, our colleagues, just engaging the world in general, has been particularly challenging to the emotional and mental well-being of everyone. Our mental health has been profoundly and pervasively affected. And we're now faced with the challenge of how to deal with that reality. The ongoing difficulty for people is, how do you reclaim your sense of personal power, and how do you reclaim the sense of healthy entitlement, which means I can be active, I can represent, I can take initiative, I can revise, I can revisit, I can create, I can recreate. I mean, many of the things that we take for granted in life in general, and certainly in the world of creativity, which is about opera, music, anything that involves both our internal satisfaction and our interaction with others, has been significantly altered. If there were 2 points I would make today, the first one would be, for anyone and everyone, the most effective way to get through how much our world has been altered is to recognize that COVID-19 has been a unique event that has changed what we do, what we think we can do, and has created a lot of challenge to our emotional well-being. If people can begin with accepting life as we know it, will resume in certain forms. We will have the opportunity for a greater level of creativity. But the kindest and the best thing that can be done is to go to ourselves and out loud. My world, the world in general, has been significantly altered so that we take out any sense of shame, guilt, or self-loathing. Three of the things that can be the most harmful and toxic to our own well-being or to the well-being of others based on how we react to that. So that point being that if nothing else, I would hope people can, with compassion, with kindness, with acceptance, acknowledge very freely and without shame, everything has been changed to some degree. However, human beings being as resilient as they are, as hardwired for attachment and belongingness, we now have opportunities to figure out how to create connection, how to create attachment in ways that can be even more meaningful because we've gotten a broader perspective about what really counts and what really gratifies us and supports and helps other people. So that would be my major point. And then my second is that with all the changes of opportunity, which means frankly lack of opportunity, people have gone into a crisis of going, who am I? What do I really value? What can I do? What will even be possible to do? And one of the challenges for any kind of loss is figuring out how to get through the denial of it, to get through the denial that our lives have been changed. We're now much more restricted. And yes, it's beginning to come back carefully, but we're restricted to settings on a pretty close to 24/7 basis. And that is our home, the familiarity of our office setting, or the places that we could take ourselves to be active in the world. Those have been altered. And so one of the big challenges is to not conclude that my life and my abilities have been eliminated or have been permanently harmed. It's like when people lose a job, and many people have lost jobs or had their jobs so redefined that it's like, what do I really do and what is really of importance and what kind of a contribution I make or can I make? The central point that I want people to try and relate to is what has changed is our opportunity now to be active and to participate. But what hasn't changed, yes, it can be for a moment sealed off, pushed to the side, not within reach. But what hasn't changed is we have the knowledge that we had before about the work we did. We have the experience that we've had. We have the skills. And so it's not like we've lost knowledge, skills, experience, creativity. We may have lost access to being able to utilize those facts of life. But the encouraging thing for people is to go, I haven't lost what pre-existed in that way. I may have lost opportunities, but the opportunities can be recreated. And it's just like the concept of rehabilitation or habilitation. If we're doing habilitation, we're creating something that has not existed before. If we're doing rehabilitation, that's the opportunity to build on something we have had, something that pre-exists. And again, to make my point, we come with the knowledge we've already gained. We come with the skills we've already had, and we come with the experience and the desire for creativity. And as is true with all human beings, we are hardwired for attachment and belongingness. And so from that baseline can be created the motivation to find maybe innovative ways, maybe redefined ways, but to find ways that we can resume in some form what is most meaningful to us. And being in the arts, being active in the field of music, in the field of opera, one of the things that I've found to be so powerful for people who are affiliated with opera is that it's a multidimensional experience. You get to see, you get to hear, you get to feel in a resonating fashion with those who are putting on production. And unlike certain other art forms, there's many dimensions that can be enjoyed, and that's about helping people feel more of their whole self and to relate and resonate with other people's whole self. So in this COVID global pandemic, one of the challenges is to not feel like a failure. But what we do know is that the past predicts the future. Now, people can change that future, but if they can hold on to the fact that from the past, they know what they've experienced. They know what has been satisfying. And yes, we'll be redefining some of that, but the baseline is people need and welcome the connection, and they need and welcome music. There's plenty of studies out there now that talk about music can help people who have Alzheimer's, can help people with other forms of dementia, because it speaks to the soul at a level that doesn't always require words, or the words may not need to be personal per se, but they feel personalized because it's a universal language. And we know that people can rehabilitate better from all kinds of conditions through music and through the arts, through the visuals, through the audio, through the experiential. And so one of the opportunities that we have had, and I say opportunities with the quote, because one of the things we learned, well, back in 1969, when we established one of the first crisis intervention units in the country in Santa Monica, was every crisis is an opportunity. And what it is an opportunity to both review by remembering what we have accomplished, what failures we've had, how we got through those failures, and what successes we've had. So unlike the more common way of thinking is to look forward and go, well, what if? And in fact, one of the most effective anxiety management strategies is to stop and look backwards, to review in order to remember. Have I had hard things? Did I get through those hard things? How did I get through those hard things? Did I have successes? What did I do to have those successes? And like the proverbial joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if in doing the what I call the R&R, looking backwards when we're in a time of crisis, or when we're depressed or overwhelmingly anxious, to look forward is to flood our brain. To stop. In the old days, we would train people, if you catch on fire, you don't run. That will only feed the flames with the oxygen. What you do is stop, drop, and roll. So the equivalent of crisis management is to stop, to R&R, to review by remembering. Have I had hard things? How did I get through those things? Did I have some successes? What were those? And then all we have to do is think of what's the next one thing I can do. And sometimes that's doing the same thing again and again, repetition for mastery. It's like I said earlier in a conversation, little babies learn to balance their body by falling down nearly 300 times. But because human nature is oriented to repetition for mastery, what we do and what we continue to do, we can become resilient. And we certainly have seen in the last 15 months, being in a home space, trying to figure out where are the boundaries on home, work, working around the home, whatever number of people occupy that space, they all have their needs, they all have their agenda. And how do I do my work? How do I do my separation from work related to my family? And my family may be just myself. My family may be me and my cat or dog. It may be a partner. It may be children. There have been many, many demands. And while it's been extremely challenging to people's well-being, to their mental health, one of the things that we have learned is by taking perspective, we can better manage by narrowing. All I need to do is figure out the next one thing to do. Now, the challenge of people living in their home space and then doing their work and then figuring out, how do I shut off work? How do I get motivated to start work? Is finding ways to delineate the space so that, and it may be I stand up, someone I've been working with is in a less than 500 square foot living arrangement, hardly any space at all. So what I've had her do is, as a anxiety management and a depression management strategy, is stand up and literally do a 360, just look all around your space and think about, I'm seeing the stove, that is for cooking. I'm seeing a couch, I'm seeing, and to identify what's in the space and what role it serves and what other things I can sit on my couch, I can put my laptop on my couch, I can take a nap when I need to shut off, but to anchor themselves to the physical space so that they can confirm, this is what I have control over. I have control over what I notice, what I identify its role to be, and that it's here in my space to serve me. And so I can work, I can play, I can have conversation, and yes, redefined in the space I may be limited to. That's beginning to change, but still with caution. So there's a quote that I really like that says, we'll never be content with more until we're satisfied with less. And this last year plus has given, whether we want it or not, a lot of opportunity for people to review in the end what really matters. And what, of course, really matters is that we find something that's meaningful and satisfying. And so one of the challenges that has gone on this past year is to look at the losses in the context of, and what next? If we look at the process of grieving and mourning, and this has been a process of grieving, because whether things will come back exactly as they were, there's still a loss of time, a loss of opportunities. What we know from the research on grieving, on mourning, is that you can't say hello until you said goodbye. You can't make change from an empty pocket. And so part of being able to do the hello is by acknowledging the goodbye. And we've certainly found in the mental health field, if there's anything that has been most useful, is to increase our sense of compassion, empathy, kindness, support. Ralph Waldo Emerson basically said, you can never do a kindness too soon because you never know when it'll be too late. And so what has helped people with their resilience this year is to be mindful about the compassion to others, mindful about being supportive, being kind. It's better to count what's going right than to only be focused on what's going wrong. That may be not a natural state for someone. They may be more half empty glass perspective, but we can all learn to acknowledge the what is in order to counterbalance the what isn't. And again, we've got plenty of research that says people get through crises, people get through traumatic events by first and foremost acknowledge them as directly, as clearly, as cleanly as they can. And so, for example, if there's shared workspace and more than one person in that environment trying to negotiate what's my space, what your space, it's about the whole idea of permission and support to set and maintain boundaries and to clarify, here's what I do when I'm in this space, and it may be the space of moving my chair away from my desk, turning it where it's not easy to sit down because I'm shifting in what I'm doing. Boundaries help people feel safe and then begin to trust that I can handle or manage what I need to handle because they're boundaries. And the concept that I've found most helpful for people is the recognition that boundaries really can be defined as safety devices. If I have a boundary, it respects you, whoever the other side is, and it respects me. And if the goal is mutual support and mutual respect, boundaries are an essential aspect of creating safety for anyone and everyone in that environment, and for everyone to feel like there's a respect and a regard for what their needs are. One of the strategies that I've encouraged people to do is to start by, Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit number 5 was seek first to understand and then be understood. If we're trying to negotiate space, and whether that's our home space, is now our workplace plus our home space, or it's returning to professional settings, people feel better if they feel considered, and they feel better in terms of motivated to be more negotiable, more regarding, more willing to provide support if they feel recognized. And so one of the things I always recommend is Stephen Covey, seek first to understand and then be understood. If there's conflict, an effective strategy for dealing with conflict is to, with a tone that says, I am open to understanding. And understanding doesn't mean we're going to agree. It just means that we're going to each have a turn at representing what do you need now to feel safer, or what you need now to feel more respected, or what do you need now to feel better about how we're going to work out this problem. When people feel regarded, they are more motivated to be regarding. When they feel respected, they are motivated to be reciprocal, to be giving the respect. And as we know from years of studying child development and the human growth cycle, that when people feel like there's a me and a space for me, and there's a space for a you, and there's a space for a we, highest level functioning, is interdependent, that I can be both healthily dependent and I can be healthily independent. And so when I'm negotiating my space, I'm motivated to also respect somebody else's space and to talk about basically what would be best for you, what would be your ideal of how you'd like the situation to be. Sometimes we have that conversation within ourselves, sometimes we have it between ourselves, but the goal being, if I put my own oxygen mask on first, I will be better able to then assist others. Sometimes that means, okay, if I give regard, I may increase the likelihood that I will be regarded. If I try and identify what somebody's needing, I will feel empowered because I have been attuned to where they're coming from. When people feel regarded, when they feel recognized, when they feel empathized with, when they feel validated, it's like a soothing, warm blanket that just comforts you, stabilizes you, and then people are more inclined to be reciprocally oriented. So I think one of the challenges this past year is to figure out, how do we manage anxiety? How do we manage any of our strong emotion? And the research on mood management says the more clear and direct you can be in strongly recognizing what you feel moves you through it. If I'm angry and I express I'm really angry, here's how I'm affected. When we put words to something, it contains it. If I'm so flooded with emotion or so reactive and I can't do logical thinking, the use of empathy, the use of validation as a strategy for soothing self and soothing others is always, to some degree, beneficial. And when I feel understood, I'm going to be more motivated to be understanding. When other people feel understood, and so when people are in a shared workspace, one of the most effective strategies is to figure out, what do I need to do? And it's a question within ourselves. What do I need to do to help this other person feel seen and heard? And I mean that in a literal level, but also quite a psychological. If I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel acknowledged immediately, because of the hard wiring of human beings, we are motivated to be more understanding, to be more kind, to be more compassionate, be supportive. Giving makes us feel good, makes us feel better about in the giving we're getting. And so it becomes a reciprocal process. And when I think about opera and music and any of the arts, it's about a synergistic, interactive, mutually beneficial process. And that's been the challenge this year. As we know, part of the essential safeguards was isolate, restrict your activities. And that's been the challenge that we in the mental health field are facing, is because we know that when you're dealing with trauma, and trauma is something that's so out of the ordinary, we don't have our usual coping strategies. The challenge is to figure out how to be active when the basic protocol has been isolate, restrict, highly restrict your interactions for safety. And so that's been not only counterintuitive how to make ourselves feel better and how to help others feel better. So the strategy that can be of great benefit is a review to remember, managing the anxiety by going, let me do reminiscing, let me recall where things have been of satisfaction or success, so that I can stabilize my emotional well-being by my cognitive remembering. We know that in dealing with people who are in cognitive decline with dementia, Alzheimer's, head trauma, whatever, is one of the forms of intervention that's very helpful is called reminiscence therapy. We review, we recall, so that it recreates, we get to revisit and re-experience the satisfactions that have come from things that we have done. And once we've done something, the hope there is that, again, at some point, we can redo some variation of that. And that's what gives people a sense of mastery over their emotions, is to remember and know that there's still something they can do. Maybe they've yet to figure it out. The singer Rihanna has a quote that says, basically, never a failure, always a success. And it goes back to a Japanese proverb that says, fall down 7 times, ... get up 8. It's not that it's failure, it's didn't succeed. But as some of the research would say, failure is a one-time event. We hope it's not time after time after time. But what it really can reflect and be seen by the person as well as other people is, my failure means I've made effort. I had the courage to try, I had the courage to do. And yes, it may not have turned out the way I hoped it would turn out. And I will have another opportunity. I can learn from my failures. I can learn from my oopses. In the field of chemical addiction, they talk about relapse as an oops, an opportunity to get back on track, that it's not a relapse, it's a opportunity. It's a oops, it's, yeah, I got off the track, I'm now getting back on the track. And so the oops becomes an opportunity. Failure's the same thing. Doesn't mean we can't be really frustrated, and we can go, that was for that moment, and I'm going to do something different in the next moment. So the second point, going back to saying the two things, is that people can look at what they've lost is the opportunity to review and know that they haven't lost their skills, they haven't lost their knowledge, they haven't lost their experience. The challenge is, how does that be reconfigured? How does it be possibly rehabbed in a different direction? My experience with people in the arts, in the field of opera, as well as other forms of art, is that what drives them is a desire to support and give for the bigger picture of satisfaction for many. And so any one thing that can be done, any one thing, whether it's sending a quote, whether it's saying, reminiscing, can you remember when we did this opera experience? And so going back into the workplace, that is easier done if there's been a review and a remembering and an identification of what the positives were. Because what was can be replicated, what was can be altered, but it doesn't mean it's gone. It may be in a different form, but it's not gone. One of the things that's been incredibly impressive that is related to what we've learned about from trauma is that human beings are amazingly resilient. And we know that the 3 traits of resilience are identified as perseverance, endurance, and hard work. And it doesn't mean there aren't hard things. It doesn't mean there are losses. It's how we work through and the resilience we have in persevering, in enduring, in doing the hard work, so that there's some gain and some benefit. And when I think about many operas, they're pretty challenging stories. They're not always what I'd call the most uplifting story, but you see the determination, you see the commitment to change whatever's going on, to try and alter the outcome. And part of how people survive hard things is noticing the process they go through, not just the outcome, so that things may not turn out the way we want. Certainly nobody would have predicted that months and months and months later, our world would still be being redefined. But with human beings, even with little animals, I mean, put a puppy outside of a door that's slightly open and they'll paw, paw, paw to get inside that door. So we've got some innate orientation to repetition for mastery. Part of being able to be successful, that is learning how to respect ourselves enough to find strategies that can help people, help ourselves and help other people manage our anxiety, manage our distress. The other thing is to figure out what are some exercises that can be used to do that. There's several that have been known. They've used it on training Navy SEALs who have high demand, high crisis kind of situations. And one of the things that they've learned and have been replicated, if you're swimming under the ocean for 25 miles with the mask blacked out so that you just are trying to use your sense and you're in the dark, you have no idea what's bumping into you, learning how to manage our anxiety, learning how to be a support to ourselves. One of the strategies has been well researched through Princeton, through University of Michigan, through a number of prominent research departments around the country, is one that's called tapping. And it basically works on acupressure, acupuncture, but no needles, acupressure points. And it's basically And I'll show you how you do that. But you start above your eyebrows, and with both hands, you tap 7 times, and you can count out loud. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you go down on the top of your cheekbones, tap again 7. Then you move down to right below your nose, between your nose and your lip, tap 7 times. You go to your chin, you tap 7 times. You cross your arms over so that you're tapping right underneath your collarbone, left side, right side. You go around to the back underneath your hairline, tap 7 times, and then end up on the top, tapping 7 times. What we know, and actually the researchers say, if you lose the sequence, you don't quite count 7, whatever, but going through those acupressure points above the eyebrows, cheekbones, under the nose, the chin, the collarbone, behind the neck, and at the top of the head, it identifies what will release the stress. And we're shifting our thinking to, and then the pressure, and it's not hard tapping, you're just tapping, will help manage the stress and the anxiety. The other is very simple exercises. One is to close your eyes and visualize a long, well-lit hallway with 10 open doors. And the task is you just mentally visualize yourself going down one at a time and shutting each door until you get to the end of the well-lit hallway and all the doors are shut. The point being, we can contain how we're feeling, we can contain what we're thinking by just literally visualizing shutting the doors. Or another similar exercise is sitting at a table with 10 candles, different colors, it doesn't matter, and systematically one at a time just blowing out each candle. And what we know that with 10, that is changing our breath work, that's changing what we're focused on, and it releases the stress we're feeling. It reduces the cortisol levels in our brain, it reduces the adrenaline levels, because we're releasing by visualizing, or we're releasing by breath work. And the same with breath work. If you just breathe in to the count of 3 and release to the count of 4, you don't do it more than 10 times, but it literally changes what your brain is producing in terms of the chemicals that can stress us up, where we feel like we're in a perpetual state of high crisis. And anybody can do all those anywhere, closing your eyes and just visualizing shutting 10 doors. Inconspicuously breathing in to the count of 3, breathing out to the count of 4. 7 to 10 times, it literally changes how our brain chemistry is functioning and how it's producing things. So those are exercises that can be done anywhere. It doesn't require any instruments, it doesn't require any training. So the tapping, the breathing in, breathing out, 10 doors, 10 candles, it shifts our cognitive focus. It shifts what we're thinking about. Most of all, it shifts what kinds of chemicals our brain is releasing. And it's an exercise that can increase the sense of, I can control what's going on. I can at least control how I manage me and my space. And when I relate to other people, I can acknowledge what I see that they're doing that's right, so that they help to get re-anchored into what's going right by what they're doing. And what they're doing is self-management. And when we are in control of what we have control over, that is increasing our sense of personal mastery. And this, everyone to some degree has felt in this past 15, 16 months, many things were out of control. But one of the things that can be controlled is that way we see things, the way we interpret things. It can lead to some conclusions. And so if we see every crisis as an opportunity, whether that's helping my family member who's sharing my space and trying to figure out how do I respect their space, how do they respect my space, is knowing that you can increase the effectiveness if we first empathize and we first validate, we first figure out how to be kind, how to be non-judgmental. Rudyard Kipling said, be slow to judge, for we know little of what has been done and nothing of what has been resisted. We don't know what they've done to cope. We don't know what they may have resisted. So the beauty and the power of that is if we take the position of be slow to judge, for we know little of what has been done and nothing of what has been resisted. That helps us be motivated to be kinder. That helps others to feel reciprocal because they've been treated with compassion and kindness. And that's what we can always have control over, is seek first to understand and then be understood. And knowing that this too shall pass, we will get through this. And the goal is to get through it with as much self-acceptance, self-support, and helping people realize that's not selfish. It's self-support, it's self-protective, it's self-motivating. Because if we can manage how we are feeling, how we're thinking, the perspective we take, we can be of much greater service, benefit to others by the attitude we give them. So that again, if there's a lapse, not a relapse, it's an oops opportunity to try again, because again means we will get to mastery, never a failure, always a lesson. And so part of the challenge this past year during the pandemic is to change our perspective about how we evaluate, how we interpret, what we conclude. And again, it's just like the airline instructions. They say oxygen mask will deploy. First you put your own on, and then you help the vulnerable that's around you. They don't say help everybody else and hope you're not brain dead from lack of oxygen, nor do they say the oxygen mask will deploy. Put your own on and say the hell with the rest of you, hope you figure it out. It's self and other. And so we can be more effective in giving compassion if we're compassionate with ourselves, if we're not judging, but seeking to understand. I'm always trying to help people be motivated to be curious before they're critical, to be curious before they reach conclusions, to broaden their perspective by considering that there's always another way to figure things out. The good news for human beings is we have a frontal cortex. And even though what triggers us initially is that our more primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, where when the threat comes, it's fight or flight. Sometimes it then moves into freeze. But how we think about things, that's the value of human beings, is they have the capacity to thought before action. And so going, I may not know the answer, but I can figure it out. I may not know what to do, but if I start with, what can I do to help you? Or what are you angry about? Or what do you need differently from me? There's a dual benefit, because I'm putting my focus on how can I be a support to somebody else. And if I'm being active, active is the one ingredient, if you will, that we know with trauma work, is doing something. Now, pandemic has been a challenge about how do you do it when you're in isolation. So what do you do? What can you do? What can you do for others? But again, human beings are pretty creative. So we found ways to do that online. We found ways to make calls, to write notes, to write letters, so that it really says, I still see you, you still exist, I still exist. And my goal is to not judge you, not to judge myself, but to understand and to negotiate. And some people may be going back into the workplace at some level going, but am I really who I'm representing myself to be? Yeah, actually, what people should consider is I'm coming back actually having proven to myself that I have more flexibility than I may have known. I have more resiliency than I may have known. I can be noticing what the flexibility and the resiliency is for other people, so that we can feel like it's not just a me, but there's a we. And people always feel better. That's why we have literally tens of thousands of support groups around all kinds of different conditions, because when people don't feel like they're in the boat alone, there's something that gives us a sense of hope, because we're all hardwired for attachment and belongingness. And so if we take that hardwiring and then we use it to go, how can I be more able to be understanding? How can I seek first to understand by inviting them to talk about what do they need, what would work best for them, what would be helpful to them? I'm going to empower myself because I'm being kind, I'm being skilled.
Judy, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate all of your insights and thoughts. And boy, I would sure like to speak with you every single day, I'll tell you.
Thank you.
If I could ask you just a couple brief questions about that might be a little bit more specific to opera professionals and those who are going back into the workplace. First of all, we know that the world of opera is really kind of a seller's market. There are many more opportunities, many more people who are interested in jobs than there are opportunities. And this goes for both artists and administrators. How do you balance the desire to protect your mental health and advocate with yourself with your fear of being labeled as difficult or problematic that might either limit your opportunities or really make them disappear altogether?
Yeah, being mindful of the impact on others is really the essence of that. How do I advocate for myself if I'm struggling with anxiety? I don't want to look like that. That has to be accommodated above all else. One of the things that can be a very effective strategy is to, with acceptance, talk about yes, and you identify whatever the feeling is. And I know with support, I can cope with that. So it's to remind yourself that if you find the right kind of support, you can cope with that. And part of being able to cope with that is to acknowledge other people are struggling too, or whoever you're negotiating with it. You too know that this has been challenging. And then some general reminder. And we will find a way, or I keep working on finding ways to be less affected, just like I'm sure you found ways to be less affected. So I'm acknowledging your efforts of creatively managing, acknowledging I have things that I'm still working on managing. And it's better heard if I'm recognizing, and I'm sure you too, or you may have also found this is difficult. And it's been so helpful for all of us to acknowledge this has been hard, we've been depressed, we've been angry, and we are resilient, determined people. Something that does some empathy for what we can be sure that person's gone through to some degree, so that I don't look like I'm way in need. And that, yes, just like what we're all involved with is creative resourcefulness, that I'll keep working on being able, and I know you've been working on being able. So it creates that sense of we're in this together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Reflecting back with one another. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And one other question that I know a lot of our membership might be really interested in. You know, we've been dealing with COVID-19 for so long. We've been dealing with these restrictions to stay 6 feet apart from each other, stay masked, protect yourself above all things, and protect those around you, because so many
Yes.
of us are so empathetic. And I may be vaccinated, but you may not be. So you know, we want to make sure that we're protecting each other. And now we're being asked to go back into the rehearsal room, where we may be asked to perform in a love scene with someone else who may be vaccinated, may not be. How do we balance, you know, the last 16 to 18 months of fearfulness of being physically in close proximity with another, to the demands being placed on us in order to actually practice the craft of performing in an opera?
And I work with people who are in aspects of music. I always ask them to start out by taking their position of, my goal is to keep me safe and to keep you safe. And so I want to see how we can talk about what will keep us both safe. People can better hear if you're being considered than if it's just me considering myself. So I always encourage them to start with stating, my goal is to both keep me safe and to keep you safe. So let's talk about what's the best way. I may declare, I've been vaccinated because I want to be safe and I also want to help others be safe. Is that something you've chosen to make? So I get it. At least I know where they're coming from. And then if perchance they say, well, I haven't, which I'd be going, okay, how do you have in mind for keeping you safe and keeping me safe, so that I give that other party a chance to think about, okay, well, I've made choices. I want to be safe. You want to be safe. I've already said, I want to be safe. I want to keep you safe. So if perchance you go, well, then how have you thought? You invite them to share how have they thought about keeping themselves safe and keeping, in this case, me safe, so that the goal is to create dialogue, mm-hmm, mutual consideration, so that you're increasing the likelihood of a we outcome, that it's going to be an outcome that's good for the we, not just for one side of a me or the other. It's kind of like the metaphor. You give one cookie, you say, if you cut the cookie, to be fair, then whoever cuts the cookie is the second to choose, so that it motivates people to be. So if I say, I've done this to keep me safe and to keep you safe, what are you wanting us to do so that you feel safe and I feel safe, so that you create collaboration rather than conflict, and you create cooperation, because the goal is we both want our fair share, our half of the cookie that's really half, or that we can do this and get the joy out of what we're doing while we're also being safe, both of us, and safe for those that we go back home to.
Yeah. And opera is nothing if not a collaborative art form. So it's certainly
Absolutely.
something that we've developed those skills.
Yeah, and it appeals to that orientation and that motivation. How do we work together for the benefit of all of us? And whether I'm the lighting person or I'm the program, well, we used to hand out programs, but I'm doing some part of it, it's for the we. But we
Yeah.
each need our sense of recognition. So I found that's can be helpful. Just go, here's what I'm doing for your safety, my safety. You start with my safety, your safety, and what are you suggesting? And let's figure out how we can do whatever the task is, that we're both safe and that we can both, you can't have trust without safety. So emphasizing, oh, I want to be safe and I want to help you be safe. How have you thought about that? Let's figure out how we can come up with the best safety plan.
Right, right. And perhaps every rehearsal period can even start with that kind of conversation before
Yeah.
anything happens.
Yeah, because it renews the baseline, which is we have come together for something that's meaningful and special. And I know I want to be safe, and I know I want you to be safe, and I know you want to be safe, and you want, but you literally put it into words, and you see what I'm doing. So that it's really the whole idea of synergistic, reciprocity, mutuality. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm thinking about. I'd like to hear what you thought about, so that we both, and that's where the emphasis is. And yeah, it's like a reminder in a way that's not judgmental. I was in a grocery store and this little boy, he was not even quite 3, and he went to take his mask off, and the father leaned forward in a highly skilled way and said, Bobby, why do we wear masks? And as he's hooking it back, he said, to be kind to others and keep them safe. I thought, oh my gosh, this should be Father of the Year and Child of the Year. It was amazing. No anger, no shaming, judgment. He just said, Bobby, why do we wear masks? Oh yes, to keep other people safe and to be kind. Whew.
Yeah.
And so if that's the bottom line, that's what we want to do.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So I think we have time for just one more quick question, which is, for those of us who have the ability to work remotely, how do we advocate for ourselves for those opportunities with our supervisors in the workplace?
I think it's always important that people start with the position they have about why they're motivated to do what they do. So yes, I may be working remote because and in some way I'm saying because it's so important for me to be a part of this world that we're in, to be a part of this company, to be able to make a contribution. And so you declare your motivation, you declare your commitment, you declare your willingness to, again, collaborate, to be interactive in figuring out, is what I'm doing giving you the help you need? Is there anything that you would want differently from me? There was a business model years ago that said basically you do an assessment with stop, start, and continue. What would you like me to stop doing, if anything? What would you want me to start doing, if anything? And what do you want me to continue? And just starting from that position already assumes I have the job, I'm committed to doing a job. You want me to do the job. So yes, is there anything you'd want me to do differently? Anything you'd want me to stop, start, and continue, so that the review of what the positive is motivating to keep finding positive contribution rather than be fear-based or going, is that enough? Is that good enough? It's like you invite the feedback, but by starting with, yes, I'm doing this because I want to be a part of what we're doing as a group or as a team.
Judy, thank you so much for your insight and your guidance as we all navigate taking care of ourselves when we return to work together in person. I'd like to just take a moment to remind everyone that the next part of this series will air on August 19th, and I hope that you'll join us to learn about balancing caregiving and personal care. I, for one, am very interested in that topic, and we'll look forward to that session. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your tuning in today. Take care.